right. Hey, book lovers. I've got with me Nian Wei. He's going to share with me a book that he just recently read, and the book covers the industry I was in before, which is consulting. So, Nian Wei, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I just want to ask the first question. How did you come by with this book?
Sure. So the book I'll be sharing with you guys today is Peter Block's Flawless Consulting. And it is a bit out of reach of what my usual reading circle would be, since my day-to-day job is a researcher looking at machine learning. So talking about consulting, it's a pretty far, there's quite some distance, let's put it that way. I somehow just came across a book and I read the first few pages and I thought, well, it's actually really useful, because
where did you come by this book? Maybe you can share the time when you first saw it.
I think probably a few months ago. I think I came across it while I was looking for, I think, productivity tips or notes, and I think this just came up somehow. I don't know, it's been a while.
And your first takeaway from the book?
Yeah. So although the book is from a business consulting perspective, I found that the learnings in there are actually really widely applicable for many people. And it's just because when we think consulting, it's not only limited to cases where we have a business consulting team or a tech consulting team. A consulting dynamic fundamentally exists the moment that you are trying to influence a situation. You're trying to enable someone to do things, and you can't make the call. You aren't the decision maker, but you have a stake in the situation. And so, even though most of us aren't consultants, if you do adopt the consultant mindset, then it can help you to be a lot more effective. One example from the book that I really like is there's an example where teachers try to reframe their traditional classroom setting into a much more collaborative learning experience, where the mindset shift is, instead of the teacher leading the classes with the lesson plans and all that, the teachers try to think about the students as their clients. And then they try to frame the whole learning experience around what would my client want, what my client need, is my client being engaged right now, is my client happy, so on and so forth. And so the change of perspective led the students to have a lot more ownership over their education, and the story goes that it improved their classroom engagement. So yeah, that's something that immediately stuck with me in the first or second chapter, if I recall correctly.
Just to summarize what you just shared with me, consulting shouldn't just be applied for the professional world. What you're trying to say is consulting mindset can be applied to your normal daily life, where you see everyone as your client and you're trying to understand their needs so you can serve them better. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you want to apply it to everyone, so maybe that'd be a bit of a stretch. But I think the idea is just that when we see consulting, we tend to think of it as the business practice itself. But really, it's not about the business practice. It's just the practice of consulting, and whether you like it or not, a lot of us are in consulting roles.
Right. Interesting. And how have you changed after learning that concept?
Yeah, so I guess it helps a lot in reframing how I approach situations, especially understanding that the dynamic of consulting means there's always the idea that there's a person you're trying to serve that is the client, and if things succeed by having the client being happy, then that's how you should frame things. It changes a lot of how we think about workplace relationships. As example would be, let's say in very technically focused disciplines, where there are expectations on what roles need to do what. In a consulting mindset, you don't really think about it in that way anymore. You kind of throw that out the window and just think, well, who's the client and what's the client's pain, and are you in a position to solve it, and is it something that you should solve, and just kind of go from there.
Okay, got it. What about your second takeaway?
Okay, so another thing I've learned is when it comes to implementing change, that change doesn't happen the moment you've identified what needs to change and you communicate it. No, in fact, that's nowhere near the end. That's the beginning. In fact, you can't install and you can't engineer change. You will need to roll it out, and there's a whole implementation campaign that needs to run with it, especially the bigger the impact you want on huge organizations. And so change management is its own business, truly. And if you want change to be successful, just having that campaign alone, just putting the effort, doesn't mean that it will work. You would need to ensure that people at various levels of the organization would put their heart into it. So yeah, so I'd say that's
How do you get them to put their heart into it? How do you get them to put their heart into it?
So I guess this is less of a how thing, because the how it delves in the details, right? It's entirely up to you. But the point to be made is, we can't just think of change management as just a checklist. You can't just say, okay, I've identified, say, thing A that needs to change, and then I highlighted it to my partner's organization or whatever, and consider that no. And then if you want to take it a step further, and you say, okay, I designed a change management campaign, and then I have all these boxes I need to tick off, and then once I've ticked them off and all, then I consider my change management done. No, that's not how it works either. It works only really when there is adoption, and how you do it, how do you measure it, that's up to you all. So yeah, that's a key thing I learned.
Okay. Your last takeaway from the book?
I think this last takeaway, I think it came a bit more towards the end, but it was talking about what does true collaboration look like, and the book says that healthy collaboration happens when you have two organizations that come together and they accomplish things that they can't do on their own. So maybe this is less of a actionable takeaway, but more of a realization on what a healthy collaborative relationship looks like. It's not so much a matter of convenience or cost saving. Okay, maybe it can be, but there should be a much bigger macro meaning to it. It should be that on their own, two organizations that do not collaborate simply can't be greater than the sum of its parts.
This comes back to that concept of a win-win situation. You wouldn't want to be in a partnership that either the other party loses or you lose, right? So is that the same concept that I'm getting here?
Maybe. I'm not sure if that's the book's intent, but I do see that it's in line with how things are, because I guess the idea is when you collaborate with someone, you do not want it to be a zero-sum game. You want it to be something where both sides can really benefit out of it. And I suppose that's also when you can really say that through this collaboration, we are doing things that we both can't do on our own.
So how does that relate back to consulting? Are you applying consulting concepts here as part of the partnership, or you're bringing two people together to work? Are you the consultant outside the two parties, or are you one of the parties?
Oh, so I guess this is much more of a general observation kind of thing. But I do believe the way it's phrased in the book, that's that you want to try and achieve.
Right.
As a consultant. And I guess for me is, regardless of what role I play, that's just the bar for what's a healthy collaboration.
So I think I just want to kind of like understand how have you changed after reading this book on consultancy. I understand you're from the research background, but what kind of changes have you made in yourself to apply some of these concepts that you have done recently?
I guess it changed how I handle stakeholder relationships, if I can put it that way. Because once you understand that your goal is to enable the client and the client's success is your success, then I'm much more willing to make sure that if there's anything that we need to address that is counter to the client's goals, I do that. Instead of say, okay, this is my job scope, I'm just going to do this and just be done with it. So it's a much more, I've adopted a much more client-centric approach to doing things.
Yeah, I remember I was taught that a consultant is an extension of the client's brain. So the clients have a lot of problems at hand, and sometimes they cannot see the trees from the forest because they're in it. So they rely on good consultants. There are a lot of consultants out there, are different kinds of consultants, but they rely on good consultants, the ones that are able to see themselves as an extension or a service to the client. And those are the consultants that usually stick by the clients for a very long time because they are valuable. So we also have to try and see it from the client's benefit. Was that something that resonated in the book?
Yeah, definitely. I think this links up a lot with what you mentioned, where the goal isn't for a consultant relationship to be a zero-sum game, but rather for it to be a win-win situation.
Right. Well, thanks, Nian Wei, for sharing this book.
Oh, thanks for having me. My pleasure.
All right.